All right, and welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast, presented by Elevation 5280 Sports. Dante DePlacido, joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I gotta ask, what's the deal with AT&T Stadium? They have the sunlight beaming through those windows, blinding their own players. They have curtains they could put up to solve the issue. But when asked about it, Jerry Jones just said, "Why don't I tear down the whole stadium while we're at it?" Completely different, just going to a complete extreme to avoid such a solvable issue. What's the deal with that?
First off, I still can't get used to your What's the Deal segments not being under the impression tone because it still throws me off. So I'm always expecting you to hit that different tonage, but you haven't been, and I'm a little upset with you. So you might be the meatball of the
What
week.
are you
But
gonna do?
I kind of see it both ways. With what's
What?
been going on with the Dallas Cowboys, I think the least of their problems is the sunlight going into their stadium.
It's the
But
least of their
when
problems, but it's a problem that's easily fixable.
I understand, but I understand. I think Jerry could easily put the curtains up in the stadium, but I think in the context that he was asked and how everything transpired to CD Lamb saying that after the game and then him being interviewed as well and then him giving his take on it. I think he sees all the other issues going on with the Dallas Cowboys, and he's like, "Oh, brother, you're going to be asking me about the sunlight in the stadium that both teams have to deal with." So I
No
understand
pun
Jerry's frustration.
intended. No pun intended, but it's a glaring issue.
And
If
I mean,
CeeDee
the
Lamb
real
catches
issue is
that
this is a
touchdown
team.
pass, it's a close game at that point in time. You know,
I know,
and
but in that particular area of the end zone, it was completely lit up by the sun. It was a really tough play. I don't think there's many receivers, if any, are going to come down with that ball in the end zone. But at the end of the day, this is also a team that last year at home had the best point differential in the entire NFL, and this year has the worst point differential of any team in the entire NFL at home.
well,
So
because
um,
two of those games were in the afternoon when the sun was shining in. I forget. I think it was maybe the Cardinals they played earlier in the season, but it was really bad for that game. Even
they play the
worse,
Rams, they play the
actually.
Lions at home, they play not the Rams, the Ravens, the Lions. Um, I'm trying to think who else they played at home. They beat the Browns on the road week 1. Um, they lost was the 49ers game, was that at home or is that I'm pretty sure that was in San Francisco, wasn't it?
Or maybe it was the four. I'm trying to see. Maybe it was the No, maybe it was No, it wasn't the Falcons game. That was more recent. I remember earlier
Falcons
in
game
the
was in Atlanta.
season. Um, Maybe it was the Saints game. They haven't played the Cardinals, so
Yeah,
I got that
they
wrong.
played the Saints at home, so that was at home.
Maybe
But I'm
I
pretty
don't know.
sure
It was
the
it was
Saints game
one of
was a
those
1 o'clock
games.
game. The Saints was a
Maybe
1 o'clock game.
maybe it was the Ravens. I don't know. I just remember earlier in the year I just remember earlier in the year that being an issue, and Jerry Jones said, he's not going to put the curtain. And this was the following day. Jerry Jones said he's not going to put the curtains up because he views it as an advantage for the Cowboys. It's clearly not. If you're missing out on a touchdown because of it, it's just so stupid. Like I get,
Well, it's
okay,
funny
yeah,
because
there's
also
bigger
on the other
issues,
side of it,
but like the bigger issues are going to take big moves to fix those big issues. This is a smaller issue, but it's a very, very small solution. Just put up the curtains. It's so dumb that he's refusing to do so. Jerry Jones is a grumpy, stubborn old man, and I honestly hope he lives forever because even outside of that, he's just stopping that Cowboys team from seeing any success ever again. So long live Jerry Jones.
yeah, he's very stubborn, wants to do things his way, and if it's not the way that he ideally sees it playing out, then he's not going to change things. And I think it's more so of him just not wanting to admit that he's wrong at times. Um, One thing about the Sun was also Kellen Moore being the Cowboys offensive coordinator for years over there. That's something that he practiced with the team and the offense specifically was being prepared for the Sun in different parts of the stadium because he
It's
knew
such
that
a
it was going to be a
dumb.
factor.
It's such a, and that's the thing. It's so dumb. Like, think about that. In practice, we're preparing for the sun beaming in our eyes. That's so stupid. It's so dumb. And not only the thing with the curtains, but the stadium should have been built facing the other way to begin with. Like, why?
Yeah, when
Like,
you look
how
at
do you
the
not
archetype of
factor
the
that
stadium, I
in?
mean, it's kind of confusing as to why there is so much sunlight beaming through that area and why there's
Because
even
they
windows.
built it either they built it east to west when they should have built it north south, which I believe is the correct case, or it's vice versa. But yeah, I mean, like, you spend what, over $1 billion on a stadium, and you don't even build it in facing the right direction. It's so dumb. But let's move on to the team that absolutely destroyed them on Sunday. Let's move on to talking about what a performance that was from the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, the Eagles once again are just doing what they need to do. I mean, it's impressive, but then again, it just feels like this is just what the identity of the team is. They have been just dominating teams, even with the Jacksonville game. They were up by a significant amount, 22-0 in that game, and they should have blew them out, but they let the Jaguars back into the game on some self-made errors. But in this game, it was pretty much clean through, just absolute domination. I mean, where can you start? It seems like they're getting a contribution from somebody different every single week. And it also doesn't feel like people are really falling off and people are just playing really well and at a high level. I mean, Zach Bond, I think he's the first person I want to shout out on the podcast today. He's been the highest graded PFF linebacker for the past 3 weeks and just
And
took his first
he,
NFC Defensive Player of the Week. So
yeah, that's what I was about to add. He won Defensive Player of the Week honors this week. Him and Dean balled out again. I'm really starting to like the chemistry between those two in the linebacker room. Cooper DeJean, another phenomenal performance. I think he was targeted 5 times, only allowed 2 catches for 5 yards. Just locked down as always. Made another great tackle, another great open field tackle on a phenomenal wide receiver, that being CD Lamb. He did it previously against Jamar Chase, then he did it to CD Lamb. He's looking great
yeah,
in
that's something that
coverage.
you
He's
really
one
don't
of the
see
best
too, especially
sure-handed
because
tacklers.
the Cowboys were trying to get the ball to CD Lamb a lot in that game, and he did have 6 catches, but he had 6 catches for 21 yards. And I think
Yeah.
you're alluding to the play that I was the number one play that stuck out to me on tape this week was they tried throwing like a quick short pass to CD Lamb, and Cooper DeJean comes right up and tackles him, nice form tackle, and takes him down for at most a 1 yard gain. So when you have a corner that can cover that well and then also tackle that well, that's just something that the Eagles haven't had. And for them to be able to address the cornerback position that the way that they have this offseason, from the way that it was trending with the downfall of James Bradbury being an all-pro during the Super Bowl run to how he fell off last year with slightly getting up there in age, and there being a lot of question marks, for them to turn it around that quickly has just really been impressive. And it looks like everything from the Bucks game, even though it happened to us this season as well in the Bucks game, but the Bucks playoff game specifically last year with all the missed tackles and the short passes. I think Baker Mayfield is still their kryptonite, but they're doing a really good job of tackling in space, which I've really noticed over the past couple of weeks. They're just not giving up big plays after the catch, because a lot of the times before, it's not like their secondary was getting beat over the top consistently. It's them getting the ball thrown in front of them and not being able to come up and make tackles, and that was what the issue was before, but it just really doesn't seem like that happens too often nowadays.
Yeah, and what I was saying during the game against Dallas was the way the team is playing now. When an opposing player catches the ball and he's looking to catch and run, he's got a DB in front of him or a linebacker in front of him, I have the utmost confidence that that Eagles defender is going to make the tackle. And that is such an unfamiliar feeling. It's such an unfamiliar feeling. We are used to years and years of bad tackling by DBs, poor linebacker play. Usually the bread and butter of the defense is the pass rush, sometimes some good safety play. But, for the DBs and linebackers to be that short-handed at tackling is honestly so refreshing. It's not something we're used to. I was talking to my cousin recently, and we were talking about the 2015 Eagles. He likes to hype them up way more than they deserve to be hyped up. That was a bad year. And I alluded to the game against the Cardinals when David Johnson ran for like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That was on Thanksgiving, wasn't it?
No. The Thanksgiving game was against the Lions when Calvin Johnson absolutely torched.
I know that there was one Cardinals game. It could be a different game, but there was a Cardinals game back in the day where David Johnson literally became famous versus the Eagles, where he had
that wasn't on Thanksgiving. Yeah, that was not on Thanksgiving. That year they played the Lions on Thanksgiving, and Calvin Johnson. It was Eric Rowe.
It might just not be that
Eric
year.
Rowe,
That's
Calvin
what the issue
Johnson
is. But I think
we did not play the Cardinals on Thanksgiving. You are completely making this up. The only times ever since David Johnson has been in the league, the only times we've played on Thanksgiving, it was 2 years in a row. It was 2014 and 2015. 2014 we played the Cowboys. 2015 we played the Lions. We won in 2014 in a blowout. Mark Sanchez had to start that game. 2015 we got torched by the Lions because of Eric Rowe trying to cover Calvin Johnson, which did not work. And I am 1,000% positive I'm right about that.
All right, I might be thinking of something else for some reason.
You're thinking of the same Cardinals game I am. It just did not take place on Thanksgiving. We're thinking of the same game against the Cardinals. And I remember it so well because I remember the post game when Kiko Alonso was walking to the locker room with his shirt off. I just remember Michael Barkan mocking him, going, "Kiko no like wearing shirt. Kiko no like making tackles." And that's always stuck with me. But that was such a horrible game. And it was a lot of missed tackling by Kiko Alonso. That's the sort of thing we're used to. We're used to the Kiko Alonsos of the world, the Nate Garys of the world. I remember.
Yeah, I guess I was wrong. The game that I'm looking at was from 2015, but it was like 5 days before Christmas. That's why I got it confused. It was around the holiday. So that was the game I remember. Tyrann Mathieu tore his ACL, picking us off in like garbage time, but David Johnson had like that 47-yard run where he broke like 6 tackles, and that's how it pretty much got famous. And then he was like the number 1 overall pick in fantasy next year. But I don't know why your cousin's hyping up the 2015 Eagles when they were mediocre.
You know why? I'll tell you why. Because he used to play Madden that year, and he would use the Eagles online because it was such a good Madden roster because everyone was like a high overall going into the year. You know, DeMarco Murray, etc. So that's why he hypes up that team so much. But it was not a good year. There were some good games.
That was the Matthews era, bro. That was probably like the least like hype team that I can remember is the Matthews era, where we had Ryan Matthews as our number 1 running back and Jordan Matthews as our number 1 wide receiver.
Well, he was our second running back behind DeMarco Murray, and then the following year, Wentz's rookie year, he was our primary back, if I'm not mistaken. But the one game that was really exciting that year was the game against the Patriots, where we came back and won. Malcolm Jenkins had the 99-yard pick 6. That was a really fun game. But anyway, back to the win against the Cowboys. Bryce Huff had a strip sack. How about that?
Yeah, and a lot of people were not complaining, but were noticing and mentioning how he wasn't on the field that often. And I started to notice the same thing. And then he ended up getting that strip sack. So it seems like their pass rush isn't anything elite or what it was the previous couple years, and especially when they've been at their peak, especially not 2022. But it's getting the job done, and it's enough. And the way that their corners are able to cover now, it really hasn't been that big of an issue. Earlier in the season, when they were still trying to get their feet wet, and we still had Avonte Maddox out there who would just get burnt every single play, it was a little bit tougher because there would be somebody open usually for the quarterback to get the ball down the field, but that just wasn't the case. And I just knew I think last week on the podcast you were talking about Cooper Rush, and hyping him up a little bit. And I was trying to tell you, man, like he's just not, especially versus defense that's clicking on these type of cylinders. The Cowboys ended up with what, 50 yards passing on Sunday?
43.
43? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was being generous, giving them an
It's
extra
just
7
an
yards. What I came in
absolute
for how many percentage-wise of how many yards that they had for the game. So
an absolute dominating performance from the Eagles defense. 5 takeaways on top of that. And the defense
you
gave
know what
up
the
only
biggest difference is, though? Is just like we haven't mentioned too often. We've talked about them singularly, but as a whole, the impact that the new coordinators have done and what they have been
Oh
doing
yeah.
as the new
Vic
coordinators. Just like
Fangio.
on both sides of the ball. Like it's not just like they were having trouble on defense last year and they fired their defense coordinator before the Seattle game. They have all these moving pieces and everything's just a mess. But they had to start over on both sides of the ball, and more so with an offense that had an established identity with established players that are some of the best in the league. So the way that they've been able to turn it around on both sides of the ball has been extremely impressive, and it seems like they have gotten the right guys. And hopefully it's just it's not going to happen to where they only have these guys, Vic Fangio or Kellen Moore, for only 1 year because someone's trying to hire them as a head coach.
Yeah, Vic Fangio has done a terrific job. The best thing Vic Fangio did was he saw something in Zach Bond, and that has worked out tremendously, to say the least.
I wouldn't be
Talking
surprised, not to cut you off, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on a contract extension for Zach Bond as we
They
speak.
better be. They absolutely have to extend Zach Bond. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm tired of every year we have new linebackers. We're constantly searching for a good linebacker group. We had 2022, we had TJ Edwards. He was phenomenal that year. Then we let him walk in free agency. And then last year we had bad linebacker play again. And that feels like it's the story with the Eagles linebacker group constantly. It's like one good year of good linebackers. We don't keep them. 2 years of bad linebackers. And the cycle continues and continues. You have an absolute stud at linebacker right now in Zach Bond. You have to keep him around. If you keep this core, you can keep this core defense for a few years now. You can keep Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are young. Your D line is fairly young with Josh Sweat and Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith, and they even gave snaps to Jalix Hunt this past
He's been
weekend.
getting a lot of snaps over the past 2 weeks. That started not just this week; it was happening the week before it too. So
and you have
them to be
Sidney
able
Brown, who's very young. You just got to keep these guys around. And the
It
other
doesn't
thing I
seem
want
like they don't have a lack of talent at all. That's not the issue. That was the case for certain portions of their defense. It felt like that at the end of the year, just the way that they were playing. But now it feels like they have a surplus of talent. It's almost like they don't have enough spots for people out there to get them into the game. But it also seems like the backups that were close to having starting positions too aren't afraid to play special teams, and they're playing special teams at a high level as well.
Yeah, Sidney Brown being one of them. That's a guy who
Keely
I
Ringo playing
think.
special teams.
Yeah,
Down the
Keely
list.
Ringo as well. Those are two guys. Well, Sidney Brown especially. I think Sidney Brown could easily be a starter on many other teams. Keely Ringo maybe, but Sidney Brown not really able to get a starting spot because of Reed Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but he's making plays on special teams. I have full confidence if they need him to start at safety for whatever reason. But the one thing I noticed about the defense this past Sunday, and really just for the team as a whole in terms of the fourth quarter, is it seemed to me like they were maybe resting some guys a bit, considering they had the Thursday night game looming. I didn't see much of Brandon Graham out there on Sunday. I looked at the snap count afterwards. He had a pretty low snap count. His jersey, his uniform, looked like it was brand new after the game in the photos in the locker room. It looked like Brandon Graham barely broke a sweat out there. Even before the fourth quarter, they were mixing in Jalix Hunt more. So I think for some guys, they were trying to get them a bit rested going into Thursday night, which I think is a very good idea. And then the entire team didn't even have to play the fourth quarter. I think that gives them a slight advantage over the Commanders, considering they only played 3 quarters of football.
Yeah, and they've been able to do that in a couple games this year. The Giants game as well, where they ran the ball pretty much the entire second half. I think like 33 of their plays in the second half in that game were like 29 of them were run plays. So they've been able to rest up a little bit. It's also always good to get the young guys involved and in the game. I mean, things are clicking so well right now. They were able to get Johnny Wilson a touchdown while the game was still competitive too.
Not only did they get a touchdown to Johnny Wilson, this is 2 weeks in a row where Jahan Dotson has had a big catch. Yeah, he had the back shoulder catch for 27
The thing that's annoying
yards.
about it is like it seems like he's going to get like further more involved throughout the game. He has that one big splash play, and they just don't go back to him.
I don't look at it like that. I look at it as he's been slowly, and when I say slowly, I can't emphasize that enough, been getting more involved in the offense. You know what I mean? This is back-to-back weeks of him over 25 yards receiving. That is some progress, okay? This is a slow boat to China with getting Jahan Dotson involved. And the way I look at it too is Devontae Smith only had 2 catches. You know, Jahan Dotson had 1. It's like, so maybe it's not even so much as they weren't able to get the ball to Jahan Dotson a lot, but they just weren't throwing it a ton. They didn't even throw it in the fourth quarter. They're able to control the game with the run a lot. So in terms of, you know, Jahan Dotson's impact as a pass catcher in terms of a percentage of the rest of the catches made around the game by the Eagles receivers, he was a bit more involved than ever. If you look at it in that sense, I don't know if that fully makes sense, but, you know, with nobody was really involved that much. So, you know, his 27
Well, they have so many mouths
catch,
to feed, and that's just what it comes down to.
yeah.
When you build an offense that looks like this and you spend this amount of money, you're paying a tight
Aeneas
end.
Smith had 2 receptions. Aeneas Smith
coming back from injury, so
involved.
that's good. I mean, it looks like they can get a contribution from pretty much almost their entire draft class and people that expected to get on the field and make plays. I mean, before the Jahan Dotson trade, we were really thinking that that Johnny Wilson or Aeneas Smith was going to be the third wide receiver. To see them have success, especially versus the Cowboys, was definitely something that I see as a plus. So this team looks really good right now. I mean, they're only getting better by the week. It seems like they're just progressing in every single area, and they're not a one-sided team to where when they had the injuries in the beginning of the year, it seems like they had to win a game a certain way, but now they're able to either run the ball if they want to, have splash plays down the field in the pass game, and have their defense control the game as well. So this team, I'm really excited about their chances, and I think looking around the rest of the NFL and the way that some of the games went, I mean, the Lions should have lost to the Texans, and we should be talking about the Eagles being tied for the best record in the NFC right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I want to point out, right, we all know Jalen Hurts gets a lot of hate. The fan base doesn't give him enough credit. The national media doesn't give him any attention. The fan base only focuses on the bad with Jalen Hurts. In that Lions game, right, Jared Goff threw 7 minutes of play in the third quarter, threw 5 interceptions, but they went on to win the game. And the story afterwards from the national media, oh my God, they were loving the Lions after that. Oh, he threw 5 interceptions and they still won the game. Oh, how great, how great. Meanwhile, the Eagles win a game with Jalen Hurts turning the ball over 2 times, and a lot of people just want to talk about, well, what's wrong with Jalen Hurts? He just keeps turning the ball over. It's mind-boggling to me. It's honestly mind-boggling to me. It's like when Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions, but they win the game. Wow, what a great job by Jared Goff to still get his team to win after throwing 5 interceptions. Eagles blow the door off Dallas. What do we want to talk about? Jalen Hurts turned the ball over twice. It's ridiculous. They expect Jalen Hurts to be Jesus or something, And you talk about Jared Goff coming back from his 5 interceptions. Jalen Hurts, after the 2 turnovers, he was phenomenal. He's a guy who does not let it get to him, and he puts in the pass, and he comes out and has a great performance after that. If it was Jalen Hurts who threw 5 interceptions in a win, do you think the fan base would be happy at all? No, this fan base would be complaining.
Well, I mean, I was hearing some banter about him turning the ball over in the first half and the way that it started off slow, and it seemed like it was going to be one of those Jalen Hurts type games. But yeah, Jalen Hurts. I think a lot of it honestly has to do with the tush push. I think everybody just thinks that he's a limited quarterback because a lot of his touchdowns are manufactured from 1 yard QB sneaks, but also it looks like his legs are back and look better than they have in the past 2 years. So that's a plus.
Back.
But I mean, we talked about this before on the last podcast. We talked about how good of a deep ball that he throws. They're making plays down the field, and it's not only to AJ or Devontae. They're making plays down the field to everybody. Dallas Goedert just came back from injury. He scored a touchdown. Johnny Wilson, he scored a touchdown. And that's when you start to see a quarterback is really feeling himself and is really playing well when he doesn't have to throw every single passing touchdown to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith when he's able to get the other guys involved. So we saw Saquon get involved in the passing game too. And I think the Eagles are just I'm not really worried about the outside noise and what people think about Jalen Hurts, because I think this team is so good as a whole where he doesn't need to play hero ball like he kind of was trying to last year. He doesn't need to put the ball in harm's way. He doesn't need to do this. He doesn't need to do that. He just needs to do what the team asks of him and keep it moving like that. So we also just got breaking Eagles news that Jordan Mailata will be activated off injury reserve ahead of the game tomorrow. I don't know if that makes his status as cleared for tomorrow, but he's being activated off the IR. So we're talking about the offense clicking this way, and one of the most important positions on an offense, the left tackle, hasn't even been there. So
yeah, I mean, Fred Johnson's been holding it down, but he's no Jordan Mailata. That's a big boost. It's
the way Micah was getting answered early in the game, I thought it was going to be an issue the entire game, and I thought the Cowboys were going to be able to keep the game close just based off
they were
of how
putting a lot of pressure
early.
They were putting a lot of pressure on him early. They were using Micah Parsons all over the field, lining up on the left side, the right side, the interior. He absolutely abused Cam Jurgens on a certain rep, but going up against Washington, they have a weak defensive line. And if you can get Jordan Mailata back, that really boosts the run game against them. So that's a key addition for this game. A game that I'm honestly a little worried about. Washington.
It's definitely going to be an intense game. This is probably the best opponent that they're going to face. Probably
it's the biggest test of the season so far. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Bengals game was a little bit scary going into Cincinnati with the history versus Cincinnati and them having one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and especially the way the first drive went. But the Eagles are really clicking right now. They're at home. It's off a short week. Washington just lost to the Steelers in a heartbreaker.
In a very funny way. In a very funny way.
My dad being a longtime football coach was livid when he saw that. Even though he's an Eagles fan, he was just livid that somebody could jump off sides. The craziest part about that was you usually see the quarterback run the clock all the way down and be doing the hard count all the way down to maybe 5 seconds, 3 seconds, and that's when you see a defensive tackle jump. This defensive tackle jumped when there was 15 seconds left on the play clock. It was like the first time that
I'm going to have to cut you off for a quick second. I'm going to have to cut you off for a quick second because something just clicked in my brain. And it is now time for my Meatball of the Week. That's right. I had a different Meatball of the Week in place, but I completely forgot all about this. I mean, this is a brilliant candidate for Meatball of the Week. Johnny Newton, who jumped off sides that costed the Commanders the game. And the reason I'm nominating him as my Meatball of the Week, why I think it was such a dumb play, is because it would have made no sense for the Steelers to snap that ball. It would have made no sense at all. They were what? at midfield. If you don't get it, the Commanders can easily get into field goal range
The
and
Commanders
win the
need
game.
12 yards, if that, to be in field goal position.
Yeah, they're obviously not going to snap the ball. It would be purely idiotic if they did. It was so obvious they were just lining up to try and get them to jump off sides. All you have to do is not jump off sides, and you're fine. You're home free.
And this is something that you got to talk about with your defense, because at the end of the day, like the long track history of Mike Tomlin, one of the longest tenured coaches. I think Mike Tomlin is the longest tenured coach in the NFL right now, isn't he? Has to be.
Like for one single team, or just
not even
tenured
close
as a coach in the NFL. Yeah. I believe so. How long has Pete Carroll been in Seattle?
He's not in Seattle anymore.
Pete Carroll's not in Seattle anymore?
Nah, it's Mike McDaniel, the Ravens defensive coordinator from last year.
Wow, I've not been keeping up with Pete Carroll and the Seahawks then. So it's easily Mike Tomlin.
So there's a long track record,
head coach in the NFL longer, but yeah, Mike Tomlin is.
There's a long track record, and there's a long history of Mike Tomlin not being really aggressive and that not being his tendency to go for it in that position. So, I mean, that just really made no sense for him to jump off sides. And that's a game where they wish they had it back, because if they lose to the Eagles tomorrow, then we're talking about them being in a 2-hole gap instead of them potentially winning that game versus the Steelers. And then even if they lost to the Eagles, still being neck and neck with the Eagles in the divisional race.
Yeah. And it also knocks you back into second place for a few days going into Thursday night, depending on if you win or lose.
What's your prediction for the Washington Commanders Thursday night football game versus the Eagles? Like, what type of game do you think the Eagles need to play?
I think the offense is going to need to bring it. I think with how well this defense has been playing, I don't think you can expect to see as dominating of a performance on defense as we've been accustomed to seeing since the bye week. I think this is a very good Washington Commanders offense. They have a strong running game, rookie quarterback who's been playing very well. They have a great wide receiver,
Brian Robinson Jr. as well.
Yeah, they have Zach Ertz to throw to, who, when I look at that, I look at, what killed us in the Bengals game while the Bengals were doing well on offense, and that was Mike Gesicki, a tight end. So part of me believes maybe good tight ends have a favorable matchup against us. I think the Commanders are still going to do pretty well on offense. So I think the Eagles are going to need to bring it on offense as well.
Yeah, I think the pass rush is going to have to get home versus Jaden Daniels, and actually getting him to the ground is a whole different story than getting into the backfield. He's pretty elusive back there, so they're going to have to do a good job with that. Their passing game, I wouldn't say is limited, but a lot of their big passing game has to do with stopping Terry McLaurin. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets that matchup. He doesn't really line up in the slot, more so outside most of the time. So it's going to be probably Quinyon Mitchell or Darius Slay getting him. So we're going to see what happens with that. The Eagles have been susceptible to tight ends, but Zach Ertz definitely isn't the most athletic tight end, but he's crafty in the way that he's able to get open. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match up in the pass game and what the Commanders are able to do. But if the Eagles play the style of football that they've been playing the past couple of weeks and on this win streak, then I think they can beat anybody. And I think they could actually neutralize and shut down the Washington offense. I don't think the Washington offense is going to have the most amount of success if the Eagles defense just plays the way that it has been playing. But I think a lot of it has to fall on the shoulders of the defensive line, because they're a balanced team where they have a really good running attack. I think Austin Eckler, had 2 touchdowns last week running the ball, and that was without Brian Robinson Jr. So when they have 2 of those backs, now they have a check down back in Austin Eckler that they're able to get the ball to in the pass game, and Brian Robinson Jr. is a pretty good running back running the ball back there. So they have a 2-headed monster, and then you also have a 3-headed monster now with Jaden Daniels able to escape the pocket. So I think it's really going to come down to it. I'm not really too concerned with the Washington defense. I think they've been playing well this year. I love Dan Quinn as a coach, and I think he's one of the best defensive minds in the league. But at the end of the day, I think the Eagles offense can have their way with the Washington defense. I think it's going to more so come down to Washington's offense versus the Eagles defense on Thursday.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I mean is
if the offense plays up to their standard, then they're going to have a great game against the Washington defense. And that's what's going to be needed to get done, because I think the Commanders offense is still going to have some success against the Eagles defense. So the Eagles offense needs to play up to their standard so that they can outscore the Commanders. I think that's really going to be the key. I don't think the Commanders are exactly going to light it up on offense. I see 2 or 3 touchdowns by the Commanders offense is what I'm saying. So the Eagles offense needs to show up with a 3-4 touchdown performance, which they can very well do, but sometimes they just don't play up to their standard on offense. And I think that's going to be key for them to do to accomplish this win.
Well, I think the one thing that the Eagles have going for them now is they really truly have an identity pretty much on both sides of the ball, and they know what it takes to win. So I think the offense now isn't really struggling with what they need to do to get the ball down the field and be successful. I think they know what their identity is. They're going to run the ball. They've proven that they want to run the ball a lot and take shots down the field when they can. That's traditional football, play action football. And they've been doing it really well. They got 2 receivers. They got their full plethora of weapons back. And if Jordan Mailata is back, then their offense should be at full strength. So,
yeah, it'll be interesting to see. My only thing is, of course, I have Terry McLaurin starting on my fantasy team this week. Part of me is worried Quinyon Mitchell. Yeah, I got the dub this week. It came down to Tyreek Hill on Monday Night Football. I needed 6 points from him. He gave me 11, so I was able to get the win there.
Yeah, one of my leagues came down to Tyreek, and I needed 10 points from him. And after he scored that touchdown, I was literally winning 100.8 to 100.7.
Yeah. Hey.
Whatever it takes.
And your team lost again this week, just to bring that up.
Yeah, I think we're done discussing that on the podcast for this season. We'll
but we're going to bring it up every week. But no, part of me is worried Quinyon Mitchell is going to absolutely shut down Terry McLaurin. That's my worry as a fantasy owner. And here's the thing, too. I have to bench Chuba Hubbard because it's his bye week, right? So that leads me to put Jackson Smith-Njigba in the flex spot, which is where Chuba Hubbard was, because I have Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry as well. If it wasn't for Chuba Hubbard's bye week, I would start Smith-Njigba over Terry McLaurin, because the Eagles secondary has been shutting down wide receivers left and right. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, plenty of other guys. But my next best receiver after Jackson Smith-Njigba is Elijah Moore. At that point, I'd rather start Terry McLaurin.
That's when I would start Smith-Njigba.
Yeah, but I would start Smith-Njigba over Terry McLaurin in a heartbeat if I was in position to. But anyway, that's the end of the weekly update for my fantasy team, which is currently playoff bound. Let's move on to another topic. I was going to let you and then.
No, yeah, I was waiting for you to transition it, but yeah, we had the Philadelphia 76ers, Joel Embiid making his season debut last night. Didn't go as planned. I think he ended up 2 for 13, 11 or 13 points on the night.
13 points.
Paul George was cooking from 3. I think Paul George.
Jared McCain's been hooping.
That was somebody I was going to get to where. It looks like all the additions are panning out pretty well so far.
Not Eric Gordon. He's not playing well.
Yeah, but that's more so of a depth minor move. When you have to overhaul your roster and add 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 new guys. There's going to be some guys out there. He hasn't really even been getting minutes recently, but since Tyrese Maxey has went down, Jared McCain has been balling. He has 3 straight games of over 18 points, including a 27-point game, which is his career high versus the Charlotte Hornets, where he led the Sixers in scoring and led the Sixers to a victory that night. So he looks really good. He's being really aggressive now. And I think it's really good because they're starting Kyle Lowry now, and their starting lineup, they haven't really been able to put all the guys they envisioned out there yet, to where they haven't had Tyrese, Paul George, and Joel Embiid all healthy at the same time. But to have somebody that young emerging as what he could be, the top scoring option and maybe the top option coming off the bench in Jared McCain that young, then I think it's a really encouraging sign for the Sixers.
Yeah, I'm not going to be so encouraging with them. I mean, there may be encouraging signs, but this team's a disaster right now. Apart from Jared McCain being a bright side, this team's a disaster. Joel Embiid can barely get on the court. Him and Paul George are out again tonight because it's a back-to-back. There was no word of Paul George also sitting out back-to-backs until now, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they announced it before. Typically, I would say why
Well,
not?
they kind of like said that Paul George, there was a chance that Paul George might not play back-to-backs as well, but it was more so definitive of when they said Joel wasn't going to play back-to-backs. And then Joel also made that comment last night that he wanted, after the game, that he wanted to play in the back-to-back, and he was going to be pushing to, but that's not his call. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I understand where
at the end of
Joel's
the day, the team is 2-8. Joel Embiid seems like he might be on his last legs. Paul George has had one good game so far. Tyrese Maxey's now there. Things do not look good right now. Things look very bad, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, they do. And, it is what it is. I mean, you can't really expect this team to be playing that well when they haven't had their entire starting lineup out there. But I thought they would be a little bit better, even with some of those guys missing, just based off the role players that they had. And it just hasn't been the case. But then again, I mean, they were playing the Knicks last night. So the Knicks are seen as probably a top 2 to 3 team in the entire East, maybe one of the top teams in the NBA. So I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, we just lost to the Portland Trailblazers, and we had Joel Embiid and Paul George. It's not in that territory yet.
Yeah, but
Embiid
had a horrible game. He didn't look good out there. He did not look good out there. He played a horrible game. He didn't look good. The next game that they're going to be able to play with Embiid and Paul George is going to be against the Orlando Magic, who are a solid team.
Well, they don't have Paolo Banchero. They don't have
What's their record this year? I'm trying to pull up the Magic. I'm trying to pull up the record, but all I'm getting is stupid their tournament status. But anyway, yeah, they're 6-6 right now. They're still a solid team.
I think there's only right now, there's only like 3 teams in the East that are above 500 or 500 itself.
2. Well, in terms of being 500, you have the Knicks, Pacers, and Magic. And then above 500, you have the Celtics and the undefeated Cavaliers, who the Sixers are playing tonight.
Versus the undefeated Cavaliers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're playing the undefeated Cavaliers without Embiid, without Paul George. It's going to be another bloodbath tonight. It's mentally exhausting. I don't even want to.
This is going to be the first game this year to where they don't have Tyrese, Paul George, or Joel Embiid, and they're versing at the moment the best team in the league. So it doesn't look
it's not
going to be
pretty. It's not going to be pretty.
It's probably going to be one of the nights where Jared McCain has to step up. But I think a big reason why is I feel like Kelly Oubre is kind of lost in what his role is as well. He's not scoring the ball in a high fashion the way that he normally is, especially as a role player and giving you that 15 to 18 to 20 points a game. He's just not giving that to you right now. And it just seems like they're lacking what they're – I mean, we talked about it with the Eagles earlier in the season. They were lacking what their identity is. The Sixers, I mean, they're just out there kind of freestyling right now. So they got to get an identity, and it just doesn't help.
They're not freestyling. They're free falling. That's what they're doing.
Yeah,
they're not freestyling; they're free falling.
Well, as you can hear, as the more I talk about the Sixers, I try not to be too critical. I think the record is absolutely awful, being 2-8.
As you want to be, they stink. They look horrible.
All right, well, let me tell you why I'm being critical of them. Because I mean, they haven't had their best players. So if this becomes an issue, if we're 15 games into the season,
they had him last night and he stunk it up.
Yeah. It is what it is. Not every player is going to be on point every single game, and there's no excuse for that. But he's also coming off playing his first game of the season. It looked like he wasn't completely ready to go out there, and he just didn't have an efficient game. And that's like something that's known about Joel Embiid. Is one of his tendencies is that he kind of pushes a little bit too hard, and he tries to force things that aren't there a lot of the times, especially when he's coming back in a role to where he thinks he needs to be Superman. So. He definitely has to clean it up. Paul George looked good last night, so that was a promising sign. But at the end of the day, if it leads to another Sixers loss, then you can't be too happy about it. But I just really want to see this team at full strength. But there is encouraging signs.
We're going to have to wait a while longer. We're going to have to keep waiting still a few more weeks till they're back at full strength. For now, for the next few weeks, it's just going to be doom and gloom. Expect more doom and gloom. But
yeah. Well, I mean, the expectation is hopefully they can get to 500 somehow. They can win enough games to keep afloat, get themselves to a positive record, and then get everybody back healthy and keep moving it from there. But it just seems like they've had contributions from different players, but they don't really know who on a nightly basis needs to go out there and do what yet. And it's a team that has changed a lot. There's a lot of new players and a lot of new faces on the team, whether they were drafted or brought in free agency. I like the way that Yabusele's playing right now, if that's how you pronounce his last name. It's always tough.
He looks good.
And he looks like what we talked about how many times about not having a power forward. He looks like somebody that could be a true power forward for them. And possibly maybe he's somebody that could end up taking over the 4 spot and be the starter at the 4. And maybe you can bring Caleb Martin off the bench and have a little bit more stuff to use off the bench in that type of fashion.
Yeah,
Kyle Lowry shoot like 45+% from 3 as well on 4 attempts a game.
Anyway, hopefully the Sixers can figure it out. I don't see it happening soon. Maybe eventually.
Do you think they're going to make the playoffs?
I think once everyone's back healthy, I think they'll make a good enough of a run to make the playoffs, especially when you factor in the play-in tournament. Absolutely. I think they can still make the playoffs, but for right now, it's just miserable to watch. But anyway, let's talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. Seems like they're out of the running for Juan Soto now, which is very unfortunate. But a guy I don't know
if they're trying to like sneak up on Juan Soto and they're just trying to play it low key and they're trying to do this, that, the other, or a lot of the insiders haven't been actually talking to a lot of Philadelphia guys, and it's more so their interpretation about the money that the Phillies have spent the past couple of years and them not going out and dropping another gigantic bag, because I kind of feel like that might be the case.
You know what I think the case is? I think the case is they're not even considering the Phillies in their head. I think right now they're thinking, oh, Juan Soto, he wants to go to a big market. Dodgers, Mets, whatever the other possible teams
are.
But
I just don't understand why like a team like the Toronto Blue Jays is getting thrown out around more Juan Soto rumors than
this is Philadelphia. This is Philadelphia. No one ever gives a shit about us. I mean, I've been watching ESPN every morning this week, and there's been no mention of the Philadelphia Eagles. Considering how great they've been playing, all I hear is how big of a disaster the Cowboys are, or the Chiefs, or the Lions. No one ever talks about the Eagles. This is Philadelphia. People just dismiss us. So I think that might be a possibility. It's just us just being completely dismissed, because I'm hearing other reports that the Phillies are strongly pursuing Juan Soto. So who knows? But a more realistic possibility
seems like more
now
of the
is Alex
Bregman. National reporters are more so keeping the Phillies out of the conversation with Juan Soto, but the reporters that are attached to the Phillies are more so saying that they're going to be going all in for him. So I think, I mean, it doesn't get much better than Juan Soto. There's also that the pitcher that's getting released from his contract. I think he's the Chinese pitcher, the Japanese pitcher, and he's 23 years old. So the Phillies have been in the market for a pitcher as well of any sort. I've heard that the Phillies are interested in Garrett Crochet, and he's going to be made available by Chicago. And the Phillies are one of the top 2 teams that are interested in him, and Chicago is trying to get rid of him before the winter meetings. So That could be something that they could be looking into.
I don't think they should be going
as
after a starting pitcher. I like our starting rotation, and I want Andrew Painter to get his chance this year. I would much rather
But
go
that's
after
also
a guy that they're
that's what
talking about, which
I've
is
been
Alex
considering.
Bregman.
Yeah, that's what I've been considering because they've been attached to Alex Bregman, who's a third baseman, which means that they would most likely get rid of Alec Boehm, who was reportedly thrown onto the trade block, even though there was rumors about him possibly being traded, but he was officially thrown onto the trade block a couple days ago. They also threw Nick Castellanos on the trade block before last season. That ended up nothing came of that, but I think they're just gouging the market and seeing what they can do. And at the end of the day, I think Alec Boehm is a pretty good player, but I don't think he's anything special to where like you can't replenish from getting rid of him. So
yeah, I agree with you that I agree with you on that 100%.
But do you get rid of him? Like, do you get rid of a starting pitcher out of your rotation, or do you get rid of an Alec Boehm and maybe you could bring somebody up from within the organization? Maybe like an Aiden Miller or somebody like that to replace that. They have outfield issues. Could they bring up Justin Crawford early or do something like that and not have to go spend money in free agency on this guy or that guy and just make it work from within? I mean, look at the impact that a guy like Jackson Chorio made for the Milwaukee Brewers this year, or Jackson Merrow made for the San Diego Padres. You know what I mean? Or a Paul Skeens.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see. Well, that you're talking about Paul Skeens. I'm talking about Andrew Painter. I think that's a guy who they need to promote from within to make a big impact on this roster.
Well, they have said that Andrew Painter could be available, but he would also be on limited innings pitched. So that would be throughout there. So I don't know if you would get him for the playoffs if you really needed the impact from that. But then again,
well, you wouldn't need him for the playoffs. You still have 4 great starters outside of that. You still have Sanchez, Suarez, Wheeler, and Nola.
Well, I think we can both agree that
I think the big issue is the lineup. I think the big issue is the lineup. They need another hitter in there.
Yeah, for sure. Which position do you think you like? How would you
I would upgrade Brandon Marsh. I would upgrade Brandon Marsh. That would be my first thought. Is upgrade Brandon Marsh.
Well, I mean, that could have
Alec
been
Boehm has shown flashes of being a top hitter. He's shown flashes of it. Obviously you're not going to upgrade Trey Turner. You could upgrade Bryson Stott. You're not going to do anything about Bryce Harper, obviously. You're not going to do anything about Castellanos, in my opinion. I think he's proven himself in this lineup. Not going to do anything about Schwarber. Not going to do anything about JT for now because you're just going to let him live out the final year of his contract. But then after that, it's time to upgrade that position. And I think Johan Rojas has a ton of upside, and he's just so good defensively that I think if you look at the roster from top to bottom, I think the 2 biggest positions that I would look to upgrade offensively is left field or second base. Ideally left field. Ideally make an upgrade from Brandon Marsh because he has never shown flashes of being like a top hitter. You know what I mean? Like at least Alec Boehm has shown flashes of that.
I mean, the beginning, like what he started off this year with like 6 home runs in a very short span of time, but then after
that was a very short span of time. That was a very small flash. And you look at like the biggest way to highlight him was how well he started hitting when he first joined the Phillies, but that was just in comparison to how awful of a hitter he was in Los Angeles. We highlight him being a 280 hitter. And that's like the best he's ever done is hit 280 for a bit. It's just not, and he's shown more bad than good offensively, in my opinion. I think it's time to upgrade left field.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first thing that we both would agree on is find any possible way to get out of that Taijuan Walker contract, get some money off the books, and then you would feel a lot better about spending some money. But left field, I agree. I think some of the outfield needs to be fixed. I mean, they could have fixed the outfield at the trade deadline. There was numerous guys they could have gotten. They could have got Jazz Chisholm. They could have got Luis Robert.
Chisholm? Is that what you were about to say? Chisholm?
It's tough when you say it fast, man. It's tough. But, maybe if they're really interested in Garrett Crochet, imagine if they were able to land Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert.
Yeah, right. That would be huge. I think if you get Crochet, I think you got to see if Andrew Painter can be a good starter with Crochet.
There was also another name that I saw.
Crochet has primarily been a reliever throughout his career.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Mason Miller used to be a starting pitcher until he got thrown into the bullpen. So it's kind of, vice versa. It is
Yeah.
what it is, whatever role you got to play. Another name that I saw the Phillies interested in potentially, and somebody that had a really, really good season this past year was Anthony Santander.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another name that I like. He's got some good pop in his bat. You could put him in there in left
He
field
also, I'm
instead of
pretty sure the
Bregman.
Baltimore series this year, didn't he hit like 3 or 4 home runs in the series versus the Phillies this
He
past
might
season?
have. I think you might be right.
That
Yeah,
was
I think
that was in like the
I
peak of the
remember that.
drought. Like I think it was like July or something, and he was just absolutely teeing off on the Phillies.
Yeah, that
So
would be a
somebody
name
that
I would
definitely
be
can
very happy
add
with.
them. And as good as Johan Rojas is in the field, if you look at the way that the Dodgers won this World Series, and if you paid attention, they didn't really have anybody making spectacular plays. I think Teoscar Hernandez made like a really good catch in the stands that was on a foul ball, but they didn't really have anybody out there making sliding catches or this, that, the other. It was actually the opposite, where Mookie Betts got that home run stolen from him by, I think, Jurickson Profar of San Diego, and that's an amazing play, and that obviously saves runs and helps you win games. But how important is having somebody that's that good on defense, but that liability on offense? How important is it having a guy like that in your lineup? Like, how important truly is defense in the MLB?
That's a good point, and so when you look at positions the Phillies could
Upgrade, let's say they bring in Alex Bregman and they keep Alec Bohm. Maybe you put Kyle Schwarber back in left field and you DH Bohm. Because I mean, you gotta look at it from the bottom line. Is this team went to a World Series with Kyle Schwarber playing left field? So maybe defense isn't really that
I mean,
important,
if we're
and you
being
just need
completely honest, if
bats.
everything was on the table, my first move as ownership this year is I would really try and talk to Bryce going back into the outfield, because I think it'd be a lot easier to find a first baseman to replace that position that's a really good bat, because that's a
Well, yeah,
stereotypical first baseman.
and then that's another
And
option is
instead of
maybe
trying to
you
go
put
drop all this money and not getting Juan Soto, or just trying to find an outfielder in general.
That's another option for if you bring in Bregman and you want to keep Bohm, is you put Bregman at third, Bohm at first, and you put Harper back in the outfield, and then that's another way to upgrade left field. Maybe you put, I think at this point, you let Costi keep right field with how well he's been playing
Oh,
there, and you
guaranteed.
tell Harper to
I'm
learn
not even
left
worried
field.
about right field. I'm not even thinking about it right now. I'm just let that contract play
Well,
out the way
that's
that
what I
it
mean.
is.
You're saying if you put Harper back in the outfield, but instead of, if you put Harper back in the outfield instead of putting him back in right
Well, yeah,
field
you
and
would
moving
want to play
Costa
right.
over to
Yeah.
left, I would rather just put Harper in left field, let him learn left field, because he's shown he can learn any position pretty much, and Castellanos has done such a good job in right field. You got to leave right field to
Yeah, hey, maybe he
Castellanos.
goes back to catcher after the JT contract goes up. Imagine that. Bryce Harper playing catcher again. That was like his prodigy position growing up too. He was supposed to be this
Yeah,
like amazing catcher, and then he just like, oh, let me go play first base. Oh, let me go play outfield. Oh. But
yeah.
yeah, I think the Dodgers also announced that Mookie Betts is going to be playing in the infield again this year. So, I mean, whatever it takes. And when you have a team that's
Yeah.
fully bought in the way that the Phillies claim to be, and I believe that they're actually fully bought in, I just feel like at times they have monumental collapses of performance, but it seems like mentally they're all willing to do whatever it takes to win. And I don't know if the time that Bryce Harper thought first base would help the Phillies out the most of any position that he could play, but I feel like that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. This is a team that, in my opinion, has a surplus of. When looking at the farm system, I think they have a bit of a surplus of infielders. If you talk about promoting Aiden Miller, if you look at who their best free agent target is right now, I think it's Alex Bregman. So in that case,
I'd
if
be
you
down
bring up
for
Aiden
Alex
Miller,
Bregman
bring in
for
Alex
sure, but if they get
Bregman,
rid of Alec
then
Bohm,
they feel would be more beneficial for Harper to play.
yeah, I'm down. I'm down for Alex Bregman to be brought on. He's a championship player, knows how to win. But also, if you're going to bring on Alex Bregman, that probably sets back some of the guys that you can bring up as prospects a little bit longer as well. So if you get rid of Alec Boehm for whatever reason and you don't get anybody to fully accommodate his spot, I feel like you could promote from within. And you see a lot of these good teams, that's how they win. Is they're able to get the farm system going and not trade all those assets away and actually develop the players that they drafted. So,
yeah. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for us this week.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 72 of the Paisan Sports podcast. We will be back next week, hopefully at the beginning of the week, and hopefully we'll be celebrating the Eagles taking over officially the number one spot in the NFC East in the win column and the loss column. Maybe we'll have some more Phillies news, and hopefully the Sixers won a couple games by then. We'll see, though. But thank you guys for tuning in today.